What they know is instead is today's reinvented version of the white supremacists that tends to be more amiable, and ever so willing to help by way of loans, grants, and aid. The truth, however, remains that they still have the same intention of dominating you. But most of the Africans today have not really experienced racism, do not understand white supremacy, and, or, for instance, cannot comprehend what exactly happened with George Floyd, even though they know it was bad and they also protest with the Americans, but they really don't understand the systemic racism that led George Floyd to get treated the way he was and die that way he did. They do not understand how people get sent on jail terms that don't compare. Black people get sent on jail terms in America, for instance, that don't compare with what some other white people who committed a more grievous crime are given in the same country, sometimes even by the same judges or the same courts. That's why many Africans will say things like, oh, the white man is very nice, the white countries are very friendly, they are godly, they are better than us and all that. They have no clue what the real history of the white supremacists, the white colonialists is. And they also fail to realize that white people use the economic advantage they created based on colonialism as a basis to now be benevolent, in quotes, and still continue to exploit them at the same time. So Africans in Africa have mostly never gotten to a point where they had to stop and question the real motives behind the actions of the white people that they relate with. That's the real challenge here. They've mostly never been forced to ask themselves questions that you, who are blacks in places like America, have had to ask yourselves based on your experiences. For instance, questions like, how could these people that are inflicting so much injury, psychologically and physically on us, doing so much evil to us and our children, how could they bring to us a Bible from a God that they say they worship and expect us to worship the same God who has double standards like this? How could they? How can I worship by a religion that is recommended by my oppressor? How can I accept that my oppressor will give me a religion that will lead to freedom when the same oppressor is obviously not prepared to let me go? So definitely he's going to present me his religion that ensures that I see the position of servitude, in relation to him or her, as being normal in the eyes of the Creator he wants me to worship. So you, from the harsh experience of racism, where you're coming from in Europe or America, you question the things much more readily, all right? Because your experience tells you these white people don't have your best interest at heart. But on the African continent, the experience is different. The average African has most times never experienced any, raw racism in that form. And then there's the problem of the dollar, the foreign currency, the dollar, pounds, euros, whatever, from the foreign currency, especially Europe and America. The disparity. When it comes to the continent, to the African continent, the power that the dollar or the foreign currency for that white person puts in his hands is great, because he's literally able to buy anything, including the loyalty of locals he needs. He creates an impression, therefore, that he's doing them a favor, because by the time he has so much of the local currency converted from the little unit of his own currency, there's an immediate communication of superiority. So what we have is a system that has impoverished the Africans to see the arrival of any white person as a good omen. And generally, there is a positive disposition instantly in the mind of the black person when they hear that a white person is around. This happens because there's poverty, and the African does not know how to escape from it. Meanwhile, the white person coming may be living off credit cards, but he still has access to the currency, and the value of the currency is so great that it allows him or her to live big on the African continent. All right? But he notices that whenever a white person comes around, she typically has some dollars that convert to huge amounts of the local currency. I've said that before. So, it's something that is, you blacks from the diaspora, you also get looked at in the same way because you come with dollars. Okay, it's not that you are black skin, and many Africans might not immediately associate you with the availability of dollars until you open your mouth and then your accent gives you away that you are a person from there, and so they expect you have dollars on you. But readily the skin of the white person makes the black man in Africa immediately think, oh yeah, this guy has dollars, and it reflects in everything they do and interact. But of course, you also get treated the same way, as I've had several of you complain, because you get prices hiked for you. Even those of us who are blacks and from other countries, when we travel to a different country, it's the same. I think it's generally the tendency. It's just that the white effect, the white privilege thing is much greater in the same parts of the psyche of the black people. So that's one reason why many Africans are not woke. They have been so greatly deprived of their basic needs that they find it hard to fight. A trained lawyer and activist was speaking recently on a TV show, and he said poverty has been so weaponized by the Nigerian government to the point that the average individual is left with almost no means of finding honest work to do. And he added that it's almost like the Nigerian state is begging you to become a criminal, pushing you to adopt that way of life. So people adopt a survivalist mindset, and that makes it harder for people to become woke. I mean, the man that is worried about getting food to eat for himself and his family doesn't have time to start thinking of whether or not he's inferior to the other race, if that person is going to give him something to eat. All right? I'll get a clip of that video and insert it.
Even the state has sanctioned that. It is the abandonment of the people to their own fate and the erection of a system that exists solely for the protection of the powerful and the promotion of their interest. Who is looking for the poor man? And the poor man, having lost the capacity to think because he had been impoverished ab initio by the weaponization of ignorance. An ignorant man is doomed to poverty. When you have now gone to the point where the average man on the Nigerian street does not even know what he can do to drag himself out of the perpetual poverty into which he had been locked by the system, even when you try to do a friend of mine said the other day, he said almost every avenue for legitimate improvement in Nigeria has been blocked off. It's almost as if you are even being begged to go and become a criminal by the state itself, because you'll be punished for your honesty by the Nigerian state. So exactly what are we talking about?
Now, sadly, many leaders of many African nations have not been and are not woke themselves, except for a few like Mandela, Mugabe of Zimbabwe, Kagame of Rwanda. This is why they work hand in glove with the colonizers and the supremacists. They don't call them out. They don't call them those names. They don't call them supremacists. Instead, these leaders who are so unconscious, they have a mindset in which they are like average Africans who believe that once they have a white friend, it's proof that they are moving up or they are better off than others. So, and they'll do almost anything to stay that way. They are the equivalent of what the African Americans will call the house Negroes or coons. All right. This is something that confirms that the average African lacks accurate knowledge of self. And it is only those that choose to self-educate, like I have done, especially since 2014. It's only those Africans that are able to understand the need not to be that way. And so they might be the one that will appreciate what you're trying to do when you're trying to help. Now, one good way to help is by using your exposure to the developed world to facilitate the access of the Africans to the growing variety of educational resources that offer information about ancient African civilization, about Black history. A good example is urbanintellectuals.com. Urban, U-R-B-A-N, intellectuals.com. I think there's a gentleman, his name is Freddie. I don't know what his surname is. I mean, Freddie Ray, I can't remember. He has an excellent library of educational resources for parents and their children, such as Black History flashcards. There's a Black History flashcard 5-deck bundle. Excellent resource that allows kids to just use flashcards to learn about key figures in Black American history that have really made an impact in terms of what they did. And there are others, quite a lot of others, storybooks about ancient Africa and things like that. In the local educational system of most African nations, children get taught colonial history, not ancient African history. There's no effort made to offer young Africans an idea of what happened in ancient Africa, the history of Kemet, ancient Egypt, and the Nubian civilization, all of which actually birthed the modern civilization. No. They leave school and they grow up with no clue that ancient Egyptians were actually Black Africans. I've had to tell some of them, do you know that for 700 years, ancient Africans were the ones that were ruling Spain as kings? And, they were surprised. I had to tell them that Africans are the ones that invented mathematics, astronomy, and all of that. They don't know. Many of them have no clue. Many of them do not know that more than 80% of the inventions in America, the America they worship, were by African Americans. For instance, up to about 2014, even I did not know this truth. I'd written several articles on my website in which I was trying to inspire people by talking about Thomas Edison, and I had credited him as was provided in mainstream media with the achievement of inventing the light bulb, and the one we use today, the tungsten filament and all that. But it turns out, I think I encountered the video of a documentary, which was initially a book, Return to Glory, in which he was then Dr. Ben Carson was speaking. And he was mentioning a lot of African American achievers who had done great things, who had invented so many things. And he mentioned Louis Latimer, a black man who had worked as an employee of Thomas Edison and had actually invented the light bulb. And even the Alexander Graham Bell's the phone system he developed, the circuit diagrams were actually supposedly also drawn by Louis Latimer, and yet he never gets mentioned anywhere. So the actual light bulb
to understand a history that is not a history based in slavery, but a history based in royalty.
Human civilization started in Africa.
Some of the first architectural systems, some of the first engineering systems, some of the first governmental systems.
After visiting Egypt, white scholar Count Constantine Duvalny wrote, "Just think, the race of black men today, our slave and object of our scorn, is the very race to which we owe our arts, sciences, and even the use of speech."
In order to justify the economic drive of the slave trade, there had to be the denigration of black people. And so people began to see these sculptures of people with clear Afroid features. It was just incontrovertible. The facts, the reality that black people had designed this
Everybody
civilization.
always wants to know, what did my ancestors do? What did my ancestors contribute? Because in a way that's saying, I am an important person by heritage. But when that heritage isn't known, then obviously a huge portion of your self-image goes down the drain. And that's why it's so important, I believe, to take that young 6-year-old boy by the hand and walk down the street and give him a black history lesson and point to his shoes and say it was Jan Madsliger, a black man who invented the automatic shoe lasting machine. And he steps on that clean street and you tell him it was Charles Brooks, a black man who invented the street sweeper, those machines with the big brushes. You can talk about Louis Latimer, who was the right-hand man of Thomas Edison, a black man, who came up with the filament that made the light bulb work for more than 2 or 3 days, who invented the electric lamp, who did pioneering work in incandescent and fluorescent lighting, who diagrammed the telephone for Alexander Graham Bell. Tremendous inventor in his own right. Almost no one knows of him. You can walk across the railroad track.
It was not invented by Edison. What Edison invented was a much more fickle version that died out within a matter of, I think, hours and couldn't last, But the evidence is there. It's actually in the records. It's a fact. So many people do not know this, and they're Africans. And so the African child grows up not even knowing that Africans were instrumental in the development of the civilization they see all around them. And that makes them to have a kind of inferiority complex.
If this kind of education happens, where they are told all these things, and the African learns that the gas mask, the traffic light system, the road, the street sweeper were invented by black people, and that the first open heart surgery was done by a black man, and that also ancient Africans were renowned for successfully carrying out delicate cataract eye surgeries, she or he would develop self-esteem and self-pride. If we're able to educate young Africans from childhood with knowledge of this rich and glorious history of their race, you can achieve a completely different kind of African. This is why I strongly recommend that we adopt a strategy in which we collaborate actively with one another and always avoid conflict. For those of you coming from the diaspora, I urge you to understand that most of the blacks born and raised here in Africa do not know as much as you know about this subject. And it's not their fault, like I've explained. They were never told. Now, to make things even worse, their reality is very different from yours. Here's why. First of all, even as it relates to, I'm saying this as it relates to self-education, because there's been the argument made by some people that, oh, I don't have to teach them anything. Why should I waste my time teaching them? They have the internet there. They can as well go and get all the information. The information is there for anybody to read. It's not like it used to be in the past. That is true. But they have a different reality from yours. Because I've seen that some people in developed societies do not have a clue what the Africans in Africa have to face in using the same technologies they take for granted. So let me give you a few reasons why their reality is completely different from yours as it relates to their ability, not their willingness, their ability to actually self-educate. First, they have limited internet connectivity. Many African countries today still cannot boast of countrywide connectivity. Some areas still lack it. And because of that, many Africans cannot get access to the internet. The second thing is that they have limited resources to even use the available internet connectivity. So there's cost of the access to the web in Europe and America is quite low compared to Africa. I remember when I traveled to on the international course I went on in the UK, the gentlemen from I think they were from Heineken, Holland, Netherlands, and they were asking me about internet connectivity in Nigeria, and I was telling them that we actually paid money, and it was quite a lot of money we paid. This was way back in 2000. And the guy expressed a lot of surprise. Way back then, he was saying, we don't pay for the internet. Why should you pay for the internet? And I told him, if you don't pay for the internet in Nigeria, you don't get to use the net. He was shocked, and he felt it was like, it didn't make sense. So to him, access to the internet was supposed to be like a given. You can imagine a person that doesn't have to pay for the internet. Then they can do whatever they like when they want to do it. The African cannot do that. In the internet, up to today, till the moment I speak with you, connectivity, you need to pay for it, and it's not cheap. All right? So people struggle with poverty and therefore cannot find it easy to use the spare funds they have to invest in internet-based self-education on a consistent basis. No matter how passionate they are about it, there are realities to prevent them from doing it. You need to understand that. They don't have broadband internet either. So what they have is pay-as-you-go internet, and it's not affordable at all. Now, the third thing, again, you have to consider as the reality they face is limited power supply, especially in a country like, it's not just limited, it's also expensive in a country like Nigeria. People are seriously grappling with serious, erratic and expensive power supply. They have to purchase generators, and they have to fuel those generators in order to use them. This makes it extremely hard for them to commit a decent amount of time, okay, to self-educate using the web. So you tell people to watch videos. The people that watch videos are a fraction of those who would love to watch the videos. Many of them will prefer to download something they can read, because it takes so much more time and data to watch a video. So I need you to keep that in mind when you're looking at the way the Africans interact with you on the web. All right? So in order to accurately criticize anything, you first have to properly study and understand it. That's basically why I told you just those things I just said now, because I have listened to some of you who do not have an understanding of the realities facing the African in Africa. Okay, so these are the things that prevent many Africans from being able to self-educate in order to learn these truths that you are taking for granted, that you know because you are able to research the web. I mean, you even have cards with which you buy stuff on the web. Some of us have cards that cannot be used to purchase certain things on certain websites. So those are some of the limitations that face the African. And so here's what you can do. You may have to be the one that will bridge that gap for them. But you still will have, in other words, you have to be the one that will kind of help them with getting access to those resources, since they have a limitation that prevents them from doing so easily. So you will still have to, however, proceed with tact and subtlety to minimize chances that they might resist your efforts. I mean, you don't want to offend anybody by telling them, for instance, that they're ignorant or they have a colonized mindset. Whether or not that is the truth, there are ways to communicate certain things that make people more open and willing to embrace those truths. You need to win their trust so that you can achieve the progress you want for yourself and make the impact you need to make on them. Killing two birds with one stone in effect. Look, the minute people know that their best interest is what you have at heart, and they see how what you are urging them to do can benefit them, they'll change. They are human beings, and they also want something that's best for them. So all they need to do is to believe that you have a solution that's better than what the white man is giving them, or the supremacist, or the colonialist. All right?